Buenas tardes, hola, good afternoon. In our next session, we will be talking about a topic that has already been mentioned, actually, and obviously in the session before. We are going to have a deep dive into the evolving, let's say evolving and dynamic interaction between the European Union and China. The title of this discussion is Reshaping Alliances, Strengthening Strategic Independence, and Rethinking Links with China. The session will be moderated by Maria Martín Prat. She's the Deputy Director General for Trade at the European Commission. Bienvenida, welcome, Maria, un placer. And she will be introducing her panelists and also chairing the debate. So if you would like to come and join Maria and I, Bernard, Alicia, Davide, and Vinmantas, you have the floor and the stage, all yours. Gracias.
Bueno, buenas tardes. Se me hace un poco raro estar en Málaga y hablar en inglés, pero es lo que voy a hacer por el beneficio de al menos algunos de los participantes en el panel, a los cuales presentaré cuando les haga las preguntas que van a discutir. Now I turn into English. We're going to try to follow more or less a strict timing in terms of, I'll give a short introduction, then each of them will speak to a question for about 5 minutes, hoping to have enough time for them to have an interaction and obviously to get questions from you here and from those of you following us online, provided we don't run out of time. Just very quickly to frame the debate we're going to have. We, and you have been discussing that, I am sure, already for quite some time, we're in the middle of an unprecedented time in terms of geopolitical tensions and a change in technology. And this affects trade and investment in the same manner that it affects our economies. And when I say we, I'm not talking only about the European Union. I think many countries in the world are reassessing their positioning in the global economy and are increasingly vigilant as to their dependencies and those dependencies that could be considered to be risky. Now, the European Commission adopted very recently an economic security strategy, which has a very clear objective to try to maximize the benefits of the economic openness that characterize Europe and our economic success, try to maximize those benefits while at the same time minimizing the risk that certain interdependencies may bring in this difficult geopolitical environment I was referring to. It is a framework in which we want to identify and be able to manage risks. At the same time, it's very clear risk management starts at home by having a strong economy, a well-functioning internal market, and also continues outside by reaching out to the rest of the world and diversifying our economic links when we think we need to do so. Now, in this discussion comes then a specific discussion on China. I'm not going to get into it in detail. I'm just going to remind you a couple of figures. First, in terms of our trade with China. In 2022 and the first half of 2023, China was the third largest partner for EU exports and the largest one for EU imports. And then when you look into the stocks of investment European companies have in China, what we refer to as foreign direct investment into China, since 2000 and up to 2022, we have a stock of 158 billion euros, and China has in Europe a stock of 144 billion euros. That puts a little bit the other part of the discussion in context, and that is a discussion I'm going to ask the panelists to tackle. We'll start with Bernard Klutik. You have his position in the program, so I'm not going to lose time in that. I'll just say that I see you as representing member states in the same manner that then we will have two representatives from industry, and Alicia, I guess you are an independent economist. But Bernard, if I may start with you, having talked about the economic security strategy and the aim to create a framework for risk analysis and mitigation, how do you see it from the perspective of a member state, Germany, and how do you think we can enhance coordination among ourselves in such a framework? And you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, and well, thank you first of all for having me. As Director General for Industrial Policy, I'm not necessarily an expert in this field, with economic security being part of the foreign trade policy. It's more a question for a trade policy expert. Kind of disclaimer now. However, I of course want to try to answer your question, and I'd like to share some thoughts on that. First of all, it's important to understand and to agree on what the risks are we want to reduce. There are, of course, many different risks for companies, economies, and countries. A company can build its business plans on wrong assumptions. A company can rely on wrong technologies, on old technologies. A country might support industries with subsidy programs that might not have a future. So there are plenty of risks. The whole economic life is full of risks. But in the context of economic security, we are talking about specific risks, a set of certain specific risks. And therefore, it is first of all important that we come to a common understanding of what risks are at stake. It's important that we agree on what risks need to be analyzed, what risks need to be monitored, and what risks need to be mitigated. Knowing what kind of risks we are looking at is the prerequisite for coordinating among EU, among member states, and among industries. Second, it is important that the relevant content in the form of a risk analysis is closely linked to scientific and evidence-based data. It's important that we base our risk analysis on the best available data. Third, I would say we should use every stakeholder's strength and capabilities to gain information and data for the risk analysis. Companies that are active in international markets have huge experience in that markets and gather many relevant information. According to international accounting standards and in line with company law, companies must have risk management systems, and they therefore have to conduct risk analysis by nature, including country and market risk analysis. So in general, they have great experience in risk analysis, and that experience can be built on. The same is true, of course, for national and European authorities and institutions. I'm not only talking about our embassies and intelligence services, but I'm also talking about many other public bodies that are internationally active and obtain relevant information with regard to economic security. For example, the foreign trade promotion authorities or foreign trade chambers, both having many offices around the world with many experienced employees. Well, and fourth, coordination, of course, needs a coordinator. And this does not necessarily be one specific body. It could also be a well-defined process. So the strategy process proposes a methodology for the risk assessment and should be carried out by the Commission and member states in cooperation with the High Representative and, where appropriate, with the input from the private sector. As I said, as the private sector, the companies obtain many information about economic security. With regard to the time, I would like to come to an end. Maybe we can elaborate on this question a bit further. But please let me at the end mention another point that is more on the broader aspect of economic security and de-risking strategies. I think personally that the most important point to become more independent, to reduce dependencies, is to strengthen our own competitiveness, to promote our own competitiveness. This is, from my perspective, the best way to achieve economic resilience and sovereignty. And in this context, we should also bear in mind that in Europe we have economic strength, that we have certain fields, that we have certain sectors where we are world leading. And therefore it is not only us being dependent on others, but also others being dependent on us. So there's kind of mutual dependency. Let's, for instance, take the semiconductors. Of course, everybody is talking about Taiwan and TSMC and the dependency on the deliveries from Taiwan and what happens if. But there are also other fields in the semiconductor area, such as power semiconductor devices, sensors, microcontrollers, where we are very well positioned in the global competition. And that's at the end where industrial policy comes into play. And there's also the linkage to our policy answers to industrial policy measures in other economies, not only China, but also other countries. And that's where, from my perspective, we have to work together very closely on all levels, private, public, member states, and EU. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure via your intervention, your title that I forgot to mention when introducing you became very clear. You are Director General for Industrial Policy at the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action in Germany. But thanks for us. The point about dependencies being mutual is a very important one, and maybe one that we will get to discuss. The next intervenant is Vidmantas Janulevicius. I hope I didn't destroy the name very much. He's the president of the Lithuanian Confederation of Industrialists. And basically, the question that we wanted to discuss was this analysis on strategic dependencies, which is now focusing very much on technology and raw materials for very obvious reason. They are key for the energy transition, and solar and battery power come to mind. Where do you see priorities for EU action in that area, both domestically, i.e. European level, and abroad?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Maria. Sorry, solar models. Later on this year, we started to produce the batteries, lithium-ion batteries, lithium iron phosphate batteries. That's mean I know this quite well, this kind of directions about the question. Firstly, I would like to go back and to say that in the past, we already make some mistakes. Firstly, we are putting the direction that European Union will be the green, zero emission, and so on. We declared this, we are walking there, but unfortunately, we are not always have enough speed to do that. Sometimes other countries do this much more better. Of course, I mean China in these cases. And for us, for European Union, which is not rich with a fossil fuel, mostly we import fossil fuel. By the way, last year, Europe €1 trillion, we will be fully out of the fossil fuel. You can prove this, you can check this. That means just 2 years for us would be enough to invest to be neutral from the foreign countries. And of course, this €1 trillion in the past was spent, thanks God, 1/3 of this money was spent to the United States and Norway, which is a not European Union countries, but nevertheless they are friendly alliance of our countries. The rest moves to the different countries. Of course, not only to the Russia, which support the war and killing by our money, producing the weapons and so on, but of course to other countries as well, where the democracy is still not on the high level. What I want to say? I want to say that we need to be focused now on the faster green transition. Faster with our own hands, faster with our own industry. This would give us possibility to keep this 1 trillion euros inside our countries. What kind of influence will be if this trillion euros which we spent last year abroad, which stay inside our countries and will create additional added value there? And how to reach this? It's easy to say, but not easy to do. Because unfortunately we are still dependent on the fossil fuel, with electricity, with hydrogen, green hydrogen. Mostly we can do everything what now is doing the gas, oil, and so on. But we need to speed up. And to speed up, of course, we need to invest. This is my point. We need to invest inside the new technologies. We need to invest inside our industry here, because we are creating the jobs. By the way, without industry, there will be no defense industry as well. We need to produce the steel, we need to produce machines, we need to produce the batteries here. And regarding the China, I think at that moment, internal market regulations and protections must be done. And of course, the European Union must ensure transparent conditions of competition in its market while remaining open. International competition is necessary because it creates incentives of future innovation. It's important to ensure the application of effective CBAM. We're creating the rules, but we are not implementing them straight, and we always postpone them. Carbon border adjustment mechanism could help to survive our local industry. We have the different costs on the renewables, we have the different costs in production, and of course, some Asian countries, and we mean China, not use our rules always. Why they spend much more less money on the environment, and in another case, they have the huge subsidies now for the industry, which not reflects the real price-wise of the things which they're exporting here. We know that. I know this from my past experience with anti-dumping against solar 10 years ago. Most of the companies in Europe died. We survived because we took some niches. But this is a not normal way, what we need to do. Now it's coming, of course, yesterday it was declared regarding the e-vehicles, batteries. Just simple example. 1 Geely Motors will represent next month, since 1st of November, very nice car, where the designers was from Sweden, because Geely Motors in the past bought the Volvo. It looks really good. The range is even better than some analogs, as a BMW or Mercedes. But if you will say the same range of the car, e-vehicle car, I talk about EVE, E-Class Mercedes, yeah, electric ones, because it's the same size as a one Geely model. The price is 60,000 euros inclusive VAT, when the 60,000 euros just cost for the batteries for EVE class Mercedes. I don't know, is it really fair and competition trade? We need really to check this, but we don't need to be naive in some cases. We need to protect our industry, because sooner or later we will be the just simple users as a nation in European Union. Without industry will be less jobs and so on. And of course we need to be, but without China now, to say some another figures, 89% of the silicon is produced in China. What means silicon? It's not only the wafers for solar, but it's wafers for the microchips, any chips, you know. We use the silicon. Just 5 years ago, we have around 35% of the silicon produced in Europe. We lost this because it was not so strict rules. I want to say that we need China now, because it's very difficult to stay without China. But we need to play with the fair rules and strict rules. Because in other case, we will have the same situation with the e-vehicles as it was before with solar. That's mean international cooperation, diversification of the risks, strictly using the CBAM, and investment in the local industry. This is the keys. And of course, innovations. Innovations could bring us to another level, and maybe it's not interesting to share some innovations with some countries and other, to keep us stable and innovative countries as we are now, as Mr. Bernhard says. We are such an advance in some researches, but unfortunately we not implement in the industry our researches, because China always do cheaper and better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We could be discussing on the basis of the ideas you put there for a long time. I'll just keep the idea of fair competition as necessary to remain open. And towards that openness, I go and give the floor to Alicia García Herrero, who is the Chief Economist for Asia Pacific at Natixis CIB, among other positions. I think, Alicia, it's fair to say that you are someone with a long and deep experience in China, so I'm sure you will give us your view on whatever you want. In particular, we were interested to hear what you think about the latest movements we see in the international sphere, in particular when one thinks about the latest BRICS summit and more generally the external economic policies that we are seeing developed from China.
Well, first of all, thank you, gracias. Estoy encantada de estar aquí en Málaga y enhorabuena por la organización. And I'm going to switch to English too, because that's the rule of the game here. So, first of all, I'd like to summarize in 2 minutes what I think has happened to the world, which is basically very arrogant from my side to be able to, to think I can do that, but I'm going to try. So, we were, Maria, in this kind of Disneyland, this hyper-globalization. Not only that, we even had, multilateralism, these multilateral organizations, whether it's the WTO or even Europe, creating regulation for the whole world. I mean, it's like Disneyland, meaning it couldn't last because basically, and this is, the law of gravity, our economies were becoming smaller compared to, fast growth regions in the world, and in a way, it just couldn't continue that way. But on top of that, even before Trump came to power, China already realized that the new technologies would be based on economies of scale, that size would matter, and that not only the market size would matter, but, and this is key, but actually developing critical dependence for the rest of the world. And that's where we are. That's the end of the, I could stop here and you would tell me, well, that you've not gone very far. But that's basically what has happened. So in that mindset, planned mindset, I think basically they got it right. Digitalization is humongously dependent on economies of scale. So is decarbonization, because we basically need to manufacture stuff that we never thought we would need until we decided to decarbonize. So, economies of scale are key. And because China got this right, I think not only that, it even understood it needed to develop these critical dependencies, thinking already, in my view, although this might be perhaps beyond what they could imagine, but that one day maybe they would not have such a large market or such a growing market, that what they could offer to us or anybody else would be not such a growing market. Thus, they would need to develop critical dependencies, indispensability, to continue to lead the world economically. And we can talk about other things in which they may lead the world, but I will leave it there. And I think this was the plan. This is why China has been accumulating basically critical raw materials for years. This is not yesterday. China has planned their refining for years, and we are now stuck with, in some cases, ratios of refining of 90% of some of the critical raw materials. It didn't happen yesterday. So within that plan, and acknowledging that we're no longer in the first best. I mean, I know we would all love to be in the old world, but we're not. And I think that the longer it takes us to realize that, the more of a waste of time it's going to be not to. So given that we're in this second best world where everybody's doing industrial policy, anybody of a relevant size, in essence, whether it's the US or China, India for that matter. So, it's like, I don't think we have even a choice. The question is, how do we want to do this? And we have a big disadvantage, which is our market is shrinking in relative terms. But we are not yet going to give up on the indispensability. We had here ASML, is a very good example of that. We should create more of that. And not because I want to retaliate or have the ability to retaliate, it's because I realize there's nothing else we can do. Because the size of the market is not going to be the answer for us to basically remain relevant. And therefore, this basically means that we can start, to your point of de-risking, with a very specific type of de-risking, which I think we need, which is our decarbonization plans. I think there's no doubt by now that we're extremely dependent on China. At Bruegel, some of my colleagues have calculated 10 years to basically be able to substantially reduce China in our supply chain, whether it's solar panels, even wind turbines for that matter, or electric batteries. 10 years is a long time, so I understand we want to be competitive, I get it. But in this world, it is not enough. You need to be so competitive, you become indispensable. It's not enough to be regularly competitive, because you'll be wiped out. So I just want to call here for how to be indispensable, and I finish here. So this whole seminar is about our single market, and I can't agree more. We need to keep that, because that's obviously one way to have those economies of scale, that degree of innovation, EU-level innovation, sharing innovation that can make us, in some instances, we don't need so many instances, in some instances, indispensable, because that's the game. And beyond the single market, I think we need to rethink our innovation policies, because many of our member states are too small to be relevant in this innovation race. So we know how to compete, because the whole thing was set up to compete, whether it's state aid but now we need to cooperate, because the competition is somewhere else. And I think we need to design things to be even more cooperative in our innovation policies. To end, we need to remain open. We cannot just close the door and say, oh, this is horrible. I cannot become indispensable, so I'm locking up. Because if we lock up, we'll not go anywhere. And there's no way we can stop, the wind blowing into against our doors. So I just think that we have to remain open, and I finish by saying open means not necessarily, sorry to say, only multilateralism, because again, we can't wait for Godot forever. We can keep our mantra, but we need to hedge. So partnerships. I know Maria knows a lot about this, so we're just hoping we can build more of those so that we can only think of reshoring. We can't do that. We need to find partnerships where we can indeed use those economies of scale beyond our single market. That's all.
Thanks very much. And thank you for the call for remaining open, because I think indeed we will not be able to obtain or achieve that indispensability concept that you develop if we do not engage with the rest of the world to the extent we can and to the extent we have an interest in. It's always a bit painful when I hear that we have to forget about the idea of a rules-based international order. It's a hard one to swallow, and a hard one for the European Union. Remember, we are a construction of law and rules, and that's how we function. So I would like to think that we are rather going through a patchy period But clearly, a rules-based international order is the one that helps us thriving as Europe. But from there, and sorry, I needed to do a little bit of publicity for the European Union. Davide Cucino, you are President Emeritus and the Brussels representative of the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China. So you basically represent all of those European companies that are present in China and that have been there in the case of many for many years and with some very, very strong presence. You're also the head of European Union Affairs of Fincantieri. And probably I think what we will be interested to hear from you will be how do you companies with a significant presence in China factor in the geopolitical environment that we're all going through today?
I take over from the last statement. Yes, we need to keep an open approach, and we need really to think about how to engage our partner. You have mentioned, Maria, the trade balance or imbalance that have been increasing in the last years with China, but we have also to think about the fact that part of what is exported from China comes from production that is the result of investment of our companies in the West. So it is also important to try to understand this angle. And again, another important thing is that part of the investment that has been done throughout those open up policies of 40 and something years, it has been done for the market, for the Chinese market. So a lot of investors have been investing in China because they wanted to have a different presence in the market and sell their products in the market. However, we just published the latest position paper. I recall when I was president of the chamber, I was pushing the team saying, no, we need to squeeze the number of the key recommendations. At that time, there were 700. This year, publication goes up to 1,058 key recommendations that are set through 35 different categories, sectors, and fora. I think that we have lived a perfect storm, zero COVID policy, the war, the slowdown, the global slowdown, and now we are experiencing a real important slowdown inside China. There is less consumption, which is one of the things that worries more our companies. The government has launched in July a number of policies in order to increase the spending of the households, electric vehicles, renovation of flats, renovation of buildings. By the way, purchase of flats and buildings is down 49% compared to, with 2019. But those are measures that are on a supply side, that are not on the demand side. And that's something that could, again, prevent a recovery of the economic situation in China. We have problem as investor with the dual circulation policy. It means that China is interested only in supporting the categories and the sectors where it lacks knowledge of the technology. But at the same time, it applies to different standards. So it imposes companies that are investing there to produce products according to standards that are set by local association, by the engineering association. So obliging companies to set a choice, either to work on a system or on another. There are public procurement hurdles. Those are very evident, and I understand that Commissioner Dombrovskis has, in the last trip to China, highlighted these issues. But I think that most worrisome issue is the fact that there is a politicization of the business. And I think that on one side, Europe has set a number of policies and acts that are very fair, and that they are set according to our values, and they are interpreted by the Chinese side, especially, as an attack on China. And that is very important to underline, because we have experienced a number of setbacks due to this politicization of the business. There is a problem with media reports and with accounts, with social accounts. The WeChat account of the Chamber has been hacked 10 times, and contents of economic topics have been removed. There is an important issue with the access of information inside the country. Most of you probably are aware that the National Bureau of Statistics has stopped to provide data on unemployment or urban unemployment since a few months. There is undisclosure of energy data, which is very important, because we have experienced both last year and this year cut of electricity for the production of our investment. And therefore, I think that due to all these issues, it's very difficult for us at the moment continue as it was to do business in China. 63% of our active members have said that in 2022 had less revenue. 12 to 20% are reconsidering the investment, both reinvestment or new investment, thinking about better places, maybe Southeast Asia, even India. Therefore, I think that this is something that needs to be tackled. Another thing is less investment, less expert, less expat, and less communication. So there is really a disconnection between what happened in China, with our company in China, and with the headquarters. We have in Beijing a drop from 100,000 expats to 62,000, and in Shanghai, 208,000 to 163,000. So those things are not helping to harmonize an environment in which we could easily do business with China.
Thank you very much. I think what you have been listening in a very, I think, interesting manner and very much interrelated is a description of complexity, from the definition based in evidence of the risks we face to the formulation in time and with sufficient money of an industrial policy, to the understanding of how we can play our strengths in the also understanding that we need to remain open, to what is a very, very clear deterioration of the business environment in China today as compared to what was happening even just a few years ago. We have 7.27 seconds, 7 minutes, 24 seconds left for questions, which should allow for a few of them. So for those of you here with us, are there any questions? I don't know if there is anyone with micros that will be circulating. All right. Okay, here we have a question. I'll look back into you after to see if anyone in the meantime raises a hand.
Yes.
How do you see the growing closeness between China and some countries in Latin America and Africa, and the seemingly widening gap between the EU and those countries? Wow, that's a question. I give each of you a minute, so maybe we can get another question. And we go in that order.
Yes, very shortly. Of course, China already was in Africa, and they support the local governments, which is not always very democratic, because the mineral resources. China now have own lithium ion for the batteries resources, just 30%. The rest she is buying abroad. Latin America as well. And not always they're chosen by the democratic way, but European Union must be here the first. We need to promote our values, our democracy, and of course to invest some money in these countries if we want to be closer to resources.
Thank you. Bernard, what can we do?
Yeah. if we want to de-risk, and I emphasize that it is about de-risking and not decoupling. If we want to de-risk, we need to diversify our also the supply chain and the markets where we get the products from, the imports from, the raw materials from, and therefore we also published a raw material strategy which focus on other alternative countries' sources for raw material projects. And it is very important that we have close contact and close cooperation with Latin America and Africa in order to reduce the dependency from the imports of raw materials from China. But as you said, or as the question implies, China is always already there. So we are always a bit late. And therefore we need to make an alternative offer to these countries. There must be some added value for the countries in order to cooperate with us instead of with China.
Thank you very much. The floor is yours now.
Yes, so first of all, before China, we were also there in the sense that we can't just say because China is there. I mean, I hear you, and I know it's very difficult, but let's bear in mind that the stock of FDI, both in Latin and in China, is bigger from Europe. The stock, not the flow. So the problem is we're not following what we have been doing in the past. And in that regard, that gives a little bit of hope because we knew how to do this once upon a time. And Spain is a very good example of that in Latin. Why aren't we investing anymore? So I think the question is, why are our companies more risk averse?
Yep.
This is the question. And maybe we need to think of our setup. Maybe it's harder, maybe, but why are European companies so risk averse? I think this is a very important question to kind of follow through. And I think the other thing to realize is that why China is doing this, because, we can explore why we're not doing it, but we should also understand why they're doing it. And I think the main reason why China expanded, which, by the way, is no longer the case, outbound FDI from China is plummeted. So it's not that they can do this forever, because they have their own constraints now. But why are they still trying, even if at the time where the means are not so abundant? Because they think the world is bifurcating, and that we are in a kind of semi-Cold War environment, and they need their market. So this is why I think we need to realize what's happening, and the biggest losers are in Europe, because the US is an import machine. I mean, we are the biggest losers. So I think we are the first ones who should go out and try to find back those markets we used to have, and that would be what I would do on that one.
Davide.
I think the question also referred to the recent enlargement of BRICS, but those are all countries that China is dealing with since ever, probably except India. The rest of the relationship of the other countries is fine since ever. We have to think about the fact that the Chinese banks don't lend money for free anymore. You see a drop in the investment of China in Africa in the last couple of years. You see surely a readjustment of the approach that China has in terms of Belt and Road Initiative projects, still there, but not as huge as they were before. So probably one possibility to tackle this issue is to try to engage China in specific area, not with the model that China has in mind. We published a couple of years ago a report on the presence of foreign companies in the Belt and Road, and the percentage of the work done by the Chinese companies and the percentage of the work done by the foreign partner were disaligned. But I think this could be a way also to engage better and more China.
Okay. We've got 1 minute left. I have a couple of questions there. Obviously, we won't have time to deal with them. I want to give an opportunity to those that are in the room, but maybe you already sent your question there. In 10 seconds, What I get from the questions that we have left there is a sense of urgency. Urgency in terms of what are we going to do to avoid a situation where we have dependencies that will be negative for us. Can you reply to that in 10 seconds each?
Yes, I will try very shortly. What will be? We will be just the users nations. Sooner or later, industry will left here. If the industry will left, we will leave the research and development because it will be no possibility to make in practice the research which we will do. The scenario A is very bad.
As there are only 8 seconds left, I just would say this scenario must not happen. We need to exclude it.
2 seconds. Let's develop our, basically our purpose so that we remain relevant even if our market is shrinking in relative terms. Yeah.
Davide.
I don't think the current growth rate of China is going really to affect us. What affects us is the uneven field they are playing with, and it's there where we have to counteract. I think that yesterday launch of the probe on electric vehicles is the perfect way to try to see how we can cope with that.
Okay, I think if anything, the discussions here do prove the importance of events such as the EU Industry Days, the importance of, if I may say that, the European Commission work led by DG Grow, and if I may add on my side, DG Trade. I want to finish here with a big, big thank for that different expertise that has come in a way that I thought made the discussion very, very interesting. Thank you for your attention, and maybe we can just give a round of applause to our speakers.